Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends. Welcome to the Thursday edition of the Big Radio Show. And we are ready to go. Big show today. Lots of stuff to cover. Joining us in hour one, Ryan Sheldon is going to be joining us, candidate for District O on the state Senate side. We're going to talk with him about the state of the state, the state of the state. And then we're going to jump into it in hour two with our good friend Ben Carpenter, former representative and now the host of Oversight Live. We'll probably dissect a lot of my discussion yesterday with Justin Ruffridge, who was on the conference committee. If you'd missed that show, you're going to want to go back and listen to it. Because there's a there's a lot of good stuff in there, and it gives you real insight into what's going on in Juneau. And I will say, I wish I had. I was listening to my book yesterday as I was taking a long drive. I had to go to Soldotna yesterday, and there was a phrase. It was philosophy that we were talking about. Anyway. The phrase was this, and it was, what is evil? And this is again in the context of talking with Ruffridge about everything that's going on in Juneau. What is evil? And the answer was, well, one man's evil is another man's politics. And I thought that was the most profound thing that I had heard in regard, especially just coming out of that interview with Ruffridge. One man's evil is just another man's politics, you know? That's kind of what we're dealing with these days, it seems like. Anyway, we'll get, I'm sure we'll revisit that later on here, but we've got stuff to get to. Ryan's waiting in the wings for us. A quick peek at the weather alerts for advisories and around the state. There's a flood watch in the Mat-Su right now. That includes Squetna, Willow, Talkeetna, Trapper Creek, Petersville, and Chalitna. That's through this afternoon. They've got a lot of rain and a flooding for rivers, creeks, and streams and other low-lying and flood-prone locations. And that's going to bring about, they got more storms moving in today. That's going to bring an additional 2.5 inches of rain. There's wind advisories for Anchorage, for the Denali Borough as well, up to 60 miles an hour, up to 65 up on the hillsides in Anchorage. And down here on the Kenai Peninsula as well, there is a weather and wind warning for the western Kenai along the Cook Inlet, and up in Fairbanks, up near the eastern Alaska range in Trims Camp, about 60-mile-an-hour winds out towards Trims Camp and Delta. So, I mean, again, nothing new for Delta, right? Those poor guys out there. Anyway, so that's your advisory for this morning. I've done my due diligence and done my duty. I did my duty. Let's get into it here. Ryan Sheldon is going to be our guest. District O, of course, for those of you who don't know, is the district from former Senator Mike Shower, who now George Rauscher has been appointed to. And so Ryan is going to be jumping into this, to try and tackle this whole thing. Let's get some details on it as we welcome him to the program. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Hey, Michael, I'm great. How are you doing?
You know, it's a beautiful day. It's not quite as, there was actually some sky and some sun this morning. we'll see what it looks like after the show. But I mean, because
we might be the poor town of Talkeetna might get carried off in this weather, but
yeah, no, it's crazy. Half the time I get up in the morning super early, well before the show, and I look out and the sun's up and the beautiful sky, and then I come out 3 hours later after the show and it's raining, and it's just like, okay, all right, I see how.
I've got one question for the summer. What gives? I'm like, we had a great June, and then
yeah, exactly. Well, it was like, what happened with the winter? What gives? I mean, stop the madness, right? That was kind of a crazy time. All right, well, Sheldon, folks, first and foremost, we need to find out a little bit more about you. So let's start at the beginning. With who you are, where you come from, a little bit of your backstory, your hero origin story, as it were. Tell us about Ryan Sheldon.
Of course. So I'm born and raised Alaskan. I come from, some people might be familiar with the last name if you're in aviation. My grandfather was Don Sheldon, the bush pilot pioneer from Talkeetna. I came to the state in the 30s, and then on my maternal side of the family, I guess through Don Sheldon, he married into the Reeve family, which Reeve Aleutian Airways, some people might remember that. So that's kind of the family's origin story into Alaska. They both did stuff during the Second World War, came back, and then Don established himself in Talkeetna. Then fast forward, family grew up there, and then I came along. So my parents were down in Anchorage at the time. I was born in Anchorage, and did my schooling. What I like to say is I did my schooling in Anchorage at Grace Christian, playing basketball and all that good stuff. And then all my summers were spent in Talkeetna because that's where Grammy Roberta was. And so I fell in love with Talkeetna growing up, decided to make that my long-term home when I returned to the state after going off to college down in Nashville, which was very exciting. And and then I originally moved back. I tell people I had to make a conscious decision. I'm sure we're going to get into this, Michael, but I had to make a conscious decision to come back to Alaska because for young people, it's not always a place which is a top of the list decision, right? And granted, I've got a lot of stuff to come back to, which is great. Great family, great place to be. But I came back to. I was looking at purchasing and operating a landscaping company at the time. There were 50 employees. So that was quite the endeavor. Did that for 2 years. And then at the end of, I guess, the trial agreement, if you will, I said, hey, this isn't for me. And then went and worked for the family for a little bit, and then got a call. My entree to politics was I got a call from Julie Colomb, the House rep from South Anchorage. And she said, hey, I just lost my my chief of staff, and I'm in a little bit of a pickle. And she said, you're good with people and you're smart and you could learn the rest of it when you get down here. Don't worry about that. But first and foremost, or I guess most importantly, she said, I need someone that I can trust. And I thought that was quite interesting because I hadn't dove completely into the political scene yet at that point. And the fact that she emphasized trust was a good approach to kind of letting me know what Juneau was without even, being down there quite yet. So my wife and I were actually about to head on our honeymoon when we got that call. And we said, well, we're going to think about that. And then we're thinking about it. And then we said, you know what? It sounds like a fun opportunity. Let's give it a shot. Let's answer the call, so to speak. Went down there, went through a session. And then at the end, she asked me a question. She said, well, what did you think? And she said, give me 3 words. And I said, I'm going to give you 1. And she said, okay. And I said, disappointing. And she said, well, why is that? I'm sure she's thinking I was disappointed in something the office had done or whatever. But no, I said, it's disappointing because, and again, this is no new news to people listening today, but I said, it's disappointing because we have Alaskans who are down there that are more interested in operating on their own behalf. Not all of them, but some people are interested in operating on their own behalf as opposed to the behalf of the people that they represent. And I said, it's disappointing because we as Alaskans I'd like to think that we're better than that. But sometimes, like your intro, what is it? You said that the some people's evil is just what politics ends up being.
Right. One person's evil is another man's politics.
There you go. Right. And so I saw that firsthand, and it didn't sit well with me. And as an Alaskan, and frankly, as a younger Alaskan on the spectrum of people being here in the state age wise, I said I'm not willing to sit idly by and watch our state decay. And so here we are today. So.
Right. Well, I mean, and that's a good lead up to what's going on. So you've seen firsthand how the sausage is made, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I think even though I've been covering Alaskan politics for 25 years on this program, I could safely say that it has reached a level that is eye-opening to me, for sure, especially in this last session as we watch what happened with the gas line. And again, you mentioned the self-serving nature of many of the politicians, not all, but many of the politicians down there. And it's just astonishing to see. And it raises the question of, I mean, I often ask candidates who are on the program, it's like, when exactly did you lose your mind, right? When exactly what was that thing? But it raises the question, as somebody who is as young and vital as you, who has the connections that you have, who has the life experience, and who has seen it now firsthand from being, in the shadows, so to speak, or in the background as a staffer. Why would you do that, Ryan? I mean, why? Right. What was the one thing that pushed you over the edge to said, you know what, this looks like a cesspool. Let me slip right in. I'll just grab it and slip right in. What made you do that?
I've developed this kind of anecdotal quote myself, where people ask me that very often, Michael, and I say, just because 95% of politicians suck doesn't give the 5% of us that, or pick a figure, but it's in the minority, right? Doesn't give the rest of us the right to stay out. We have to have good people down there to counteract that horrible nature of politics. And we also have to have hardworking people to counteract the laziness. That's another facet that doesn't always go hand in hand with the horrible nature of politics, like we were discussing. But then there's also people down there that, hey, maybe they have a good heart, but they're just lazy and they're not getting it done for Alaskans. So
right. We're talking with Ryan. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say real quick too, and to kind of give that a little bow, if you guys remember, and you introed this real quick, is that when Senator Shower resigned and the Republican districts came together to select 3 names, that was kind of the last shoving off of me making that list. Very humbled to be on that list. It was quite the honor, and just from having a good round of colleagues in the party saying, hey, we think that Ryan, if chosen, this is another good name to be forwarded. And so that was the tipping point for me, after having many discussions with people in districts saying, hey, are you guys, do you want to change? Because I'll let you all ponder there rhetorically. What's the definition of insanity again?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
We've seen that rerun. So right. We know exactly what that is. All right. Well, we're going to continue. Ryan Sheldon is our guest, candidate for Senate District O. When we come back, we're going to let him give us his thoughts on the state of the state, where we're at right now. What are the biggest issues facing us? He's got a website. You can find him at ryan4alaska.com. ryan4alaska.com. So go over there and you can check it out right now to see his priorities and more. But we're going to return in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more and Ryan Sheldon right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show. because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
All right, we're in the break right now. Ryan Sheldon's our guest. Ryan, you can see the timer above my head. That means that's when we have to return to the radio. Okay, so
Gotcha.
we have to get everything. We have to get everything wound up by the time it hits 0. So is it true, Ryan? Is it the most listened to radio show in Juneau because all the staffers have to listen to it to take notes so that the majority can beat the hell out of the minority members who get on the air?
Yeah, you know what? This is the best cannon fodder that you can provide them. But no, it's I think from the Republican standpoint, even those that are independent, I think they do listen to your show. I can't speak for the Democrats. I don't know. So yeah.
we got a lot of commentary where people we built that liner because I kept hearing from people about how there were staffers that were creating summaries of the whole show and giving them to their legislators so that the majority members could then go beat up on the minority members who appeared on the program and say, you said this and you said this and Duke said this and you agreed with him and blah, blah. And I was just like, man, we must be doing something right if we're pissing people off, I guess. You know, you only take flack when you're over the target, right? You know?
Yeah, I was just about to, if you're over the target and taking flack, then you know you're doing something right. So
right, you're on point there.
Yeah.
Let's hit a couple questions from the chat room, and I'm sure we could expand on these when we get back to the air. But Craig says, will you refuse to caucus with the Democrats?
That's a great question, Craig.
I mean, right out of the gate, man.
What's that?
Right out of the gate, you get
right out of the gate. Yeah, I'm interested in making a Republican-led majority. Now, I like to borrow from when Speaker Tilton was in the House. Right, you get the Bush caucus that comes along after you have, Republicans making up the majority of the body. So my big thing is, as long as we have Republicans chairing all of the committees and the important things, which people often don't really think about, right? That's the biggest issue with when you have this weird, I mean, they call it bipartisan coalition. I frankly don't really see it as bipartisan, but it's all these Democrats chairing committees, and then we get left in the dust, right? So I'm only interested in joining a coalition that's majority held by Republicans, if that makes sense. So I think a lot of people are in that boat. So and the Bush caucus, sometimes they come along and they say, hey, we'd rather work with you guys than the other side, and hey, come on in, So
right. Well, and I think again, it's we keep getting hung up in the whole it's the Republicans' fault, it's the Democrats' fault. Right. It's I think it's not so much elephants and donkeys in the room. It's the prevailing philosophy of people who believe that smaller, more limited government is better than government being the answer to everything. We've got a lot of Republicans in there who are believing that government is the answer to all our problems, which again makes me question why they have an R next to their name. But yeah. So you just said that's wrong, right? So it's smaller, more limited government is what we should be trying to exercise.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. That's what I believe. And also smaller, limited government. I mean, government does certainly serve a purpose. I like to use the analogy when we talk about education or other things when you talk about social programs. But when it comes to education, you've got like the quote unquote latchkey kid, problem to solve where, that's what neighborhood schools are all about. And then when you've got people in dire need, like a mom with 5 kids and there's no husband or whatever, and she has to work and all that, those are the kinds of people that government is around for. It's not around for people like me or you, right? Like limited government. We don't need all of that assistance because we're able-bodied people. Go help the people that are actually in true need, right? And right. That should help tamp down even the costs that we're seeing on our books. I'm sure you're going to get to that too, but
yeah, well, we're coming up on it. Although I don't think latchkey kids need government assistance. I think we did just fine when we showed up at home and took care of ourselves for a while. I think that little that little bit of self-determination is a good deal.
That's
all right.
great.
Yeah, Ryan Sheldon is our guest. We're going to continue here. Please like and share if you haven't already. Like and sharing is a good way to get people involved. Let's get to it.
Today's recipe is the important Alaskan news of the day with a dash of sardonic smile, a pinch of eye twinkle, not that you can see that on the radio, and a touch of acidity. It goes down easier like that. Don't question our recipes. The Michael Duke Show.
Just a touch of acidity. That's what it's all about here. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Ryan Sheldon is our guest. Candidate for District O in the state Senate. Ryan, so the big question here, and of course this is, it's not an easy question, and it's got a lot of moving pieces and parts, but the big question is, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing Alaska? As you look at everything that's going on, you look at the state of the state, you've had some insider knowledge because you've worked, as a staff member in Juneau, you're seeing what's going on. What are the biggest challenges facing the state of Alaska here in the next 3 to 5 years? And what do you see as the stumbling blocks for the state moving forward?
I love this question, and where there is a challenge, there has to be a solution, and that's where we come in, or hopefully that's where we come in. And so I kind of have 3 things that are on the top of my mind from a challenge standpoint. And I'll approach them economically. And then we can, of course, also go into how maybe Juneau doesn't work together as much, but that's maybe a separate thing. But the first one is energy. And everyone's going to harp on, we need this and that, we don't have enough energy on the grid. And they're absolutely correct. I mean, it's a scary reality when you have our military bases sending emails around saying, oh, this winter we need, us on the base to turn the thermostats down or not using as much electricity because they know that our rail belt grid and even down in Valdez, when they have to burn diesel in the winter because there's not enough energy to go around from a traditional standpoint, that is not okay. We're like, one failure away of true brownouts up and down the rail belt, right? And one of the things that's been a focus of mine is, of course, everyone's going to talk about AKLNG. I don't want to beat that horse to death because I'm sure you have much more sophisticated folks on the program that have brought everyone listening through that. That is very important. I'm not trying to, belittle that side of stuff because, again, very important. Would love that to happen. On the other side, though, you've got all of these what I would call mid-level to micro hydroelectric projects that have been identified through the years. I mean, one of them that first comes to mind is what's called Teakle Dam, or the Teakle River out in when you go down to Valdez, which is part of would be part of my district. That's a 100 megawatt project waiting to happen. We've known about it for 20 years. Why have we not acted? Right? FERC's said yes to it. We have the permitting for it. And not to mention the Denali Commission could come along and just say, yep, great. We're going to do a 4-to-1 because they do an 80% match if the state can come up with the dollars. And boom, there you go. Now Valdez doesn't have to burn diesel in the winter, right? It's very costly. It's not efficient as hydro is. And then when you look more so on the Matsu side, we have, we've identified a bunch of other projects too that I'm about to release a report. Even I've got, been doing a lot of research on this. So I think energy, if we expect people to want to stay in Alaska or even attract new people, right? When people say, Ryan, how do you keep, it's always that young people question. How do you keep young people in Alaska? How do you attract young people? You know what you don't do? Make it expensive or basically make them almost ineligible to live here because they can't afford their electric bill, right?
Right.
And so that's super, front of mind for me, even in Talkeetna. Now, this is when we talk about energy and even gas or fuel prices like heating fuel, that's a trickier issue because we've got Crowley and Talkeetna already helping people out, so to speak, on working with them with their bills because of the the craziness over in the Strait of Hormuz, and it's the summer, guys, right? We're going to have a rude awakening in the winter when we actually start burning that stuff, and a rude awakening in the winter when we have our lights on all the time, right? So we have a very, very fragile grid from the standpoint of how many electrons we are currently sending up and down it. And so I'll just pause there. That's a lot of information. I'll pause there if you have further questions on that.
No, I mean, I think, energy is the backbone of any real economy. If you look at it, from a 10,000 foot view, the energy is the biggest component. It tells you whether or not an economy can move forward if the energy is affordable. If it's not, then it stifles the economy, and that's what we've seen up here in many ways. I mean, it primarily, it's one of the reasons why I moved out of Fairbanks. That first month when I got, or that final month when I got my $1,433 heating bill and my $513 electric bill, that was just the breaking point for me. When I'm $2,000 into it just for heat and lights, let alone mortgage and groceries and everything else, how can folks afford to stick around for that? It's a tough situation.
And not only do we need that, equation in our minds of how are we going to help Alaskans with that cost, but you hit on it, I think, really well, where a great economy will show that it not only has, I guess, affordable, some say cheap energy, but also the surplus, right? And I think that's what AKLNG is all about, is making it to where now we've got a surplus of energy that we can go and sell to people in the state, be it military buildup, because I know that we've talked about it for years, right? Either J-Bear or all the way up into Anderson with needing more electrons on the grid to do what they want to do if we wanted a military build out, right? Or bringing more stuff through the Port of Valdez. I mean, the list goes on. When you start providing it, it's nearly a build it and they will come complex, which I actually very much believe in with this project, because if we can't sell the power, you cannot expect people to come and invest in Alaska. So
Right. Well, no, energy is definitely important. The other thing, of course, that sucked up all the oxygen in the room here over the last, especially the last 24 months, has been education, right? I mean, it's just, it's never enough. It's, it's been flat funded. Doesn't disregard all the one-time funding that's been going on, but it's been flat funded, right? I mean, the millions and millions of dollars. We're almost up to $2 billion in spending on education for 135,000 students in the state. And yet it's not enough. What's your thoughts on education, the current state of education, the current BSA? Where do we go from here? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, another good question. So I like to bring people back to a year, 1993. It has nothing to do with Alaska. Here's why I like to bring it up. Massachusetts, a very, very blue state. I might argue it's the bluest state in the union, right? They imposed exactly what the majority of Republicans have been asking for in the legislature for the last 2 to 3 years, or maybe it goes beyond that. But as far as I've been, really in the weeds here, what they did in 93 was the MCAS, Education Reform Act, where they tied, again, blue state, mind you, they tied their education funding to accountability, the district's actual needs, not a blanket funding mechanism. And so it's not just these broad increases. They are now the number one, or pick your metric, but they consistently rank in the top 3. I see that they're number 1 right now in education. So why is it that, again, another rhetorical question we probably all know the answer to, why is it that when we look at education funding as a mechanism, that we bring things up that should be favorable to our friends across the aisle, but then they throw all their hands up and go, oh, well, you can't do that, right? And I'm not going to discount the uniqueness of Alaska in the sense that we have an insane geography to cover, which is why, of course, naturally we'd expect some costs above and beyond, Massachusetts, which is incredibly small. But we've got a roughly 19 to 1 student teacher ratio in the state, which is well above the national average of 15 to 1, right? So just from a sheer administrative standpoint, or even, I guess, beyond the teachers, but administrative standpoint, where we have 53 school districts and we're a state of, how many students, right? we don't need 53 school districts. Why not look at consolidating? And again, these things have been approached before, but I don't think that we've effectively tackled them. And so I think if you pare down the school districts, have people share superintendents, have people, you start to look at ways to make things efficient. One thing I like to highlight is I'm an entrepreneur by trade. I've done real estate, actually still in real estate, manufacturing, landscaping, like we mentioned before. So how my mind works is finding efficiencies, right? I don't want to, I'm sure, everyone's fear when you talk about education funding on the left is, oh my gosh, now my kids aren't going to be able to go to school. No, the goal is to find efficiencies, take the cost down, and either provide the same or a better product, in fact, and it is possible. And I think that we need to truly start digging in and saying, hey, other states, what are you doing that's working? What are you doing that's not working? Take the pride out of it. We don't have a corner on good ideas. And I'm tired of people acting like they're the most knowledgeable person on education. These are all ideas. I'm not claiming to be an expert, right? But I am offering Alaskans in District O the chance to have someone down there that is so, efficiency minded and curious to ask the questions that we could probably get somewhere with it.
Right. Well, again, you're running up against the brick wall. I know that we had, there's been a lot of talk about consolidating the various school districts because there's a huge amount of duplication, right? 53 superintendents, 53, assistant superintendents and secretaries, and things that could be done. But even when things like they talked about pooling the healthcare, pulling all the healthcare of these 53 districts together under the state plan, which would have saved upwards of $50 to $100 million. And yet you still get people who say, no, we can't do that. We can't. This is, this is part of the problem. You get a lot of these good ideas and they go nowhere because you're one of 60, right? You're one of 60 that has to try and make that decision.
And I want to touch on that. You ask a lot of people, okay, what would you do in the legislature? Like, why is the legislature broken? And of course, you're always going to be one of 60. But here's the difference, Michael, and I do believe this. There is a difference between having, your idea and telling your district, which absolutely that's the first place you should go with your ideas, right? Is your district. But beyond that, when you're down in Juneau, get in the offices of other legislators and ensure that you know how to not only pitch and sell your idea to them, but bring them along with your vision. Don't just tell them how it's going to be. We have a lot of finger pointing and, well, you have to do this because you have to care about kids and you have to care about education. No, bring people along. Be a consensus builder. We have lost the art of statesmen and stateswomen. And that just doesn't exist down there. And people go, well, you don't know how I operate my meetings. I'm like, well, I sure see the work product, Michael.
I see the outcomes. I don't need to necessarily see how the sausage is made if I see the outcome. Right. Sheldon, Ryan Sheldon is our guest here. We're coming up on the break. I do want to tease something in the next segment because it's something that we haven't gotten to yet. But to me, it's the most important. You're on your website. You have under your priorities page, you've got energy resources and fish and game management and infrastructure and education and workforce and public safety and the PFD, which again would take the whole hour for us to unpack everything. But at the very end, you talk about stable and sustainable fiscal policy. So I want to talk about overall fiscal policy because we could talk about everything else prior to that. Energy, education, fisheries, all this other kind of stuff. But it comes back to the budget. It always comes back to the spending. It comes back to how much do we have? Where do we get it? How much do we spend? And are we being efficient? And so I really want to dive down into that a little bit here before we get ready to wrap things up. So stick with us here. Ryan Sheldon, our guest, candidate for Senate District O. He's going to be back with us here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Don't forget, you can always check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/Michael Duke Show /live. We'll be back in just a moment with Ryan Sheldon. Don't go anywhere.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we are in the break with Ryan Sheldon here. Seeing what says, I had to laugh because my dad is in the chat room. My dad said,
It's fun watching those. Yeah.
he said, my dad said, I went to U of A with his grandma. She said, I'm in his camp already.
That's great.
Yeah. So my dad is, I'm third generation Alaskan, you're fourth. So we're close. We're close in that regard.
But company, Michael.
Yeah. But dad went to U of A with your grandma. So he knows exactly who we're dealing with here. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm liking, pretty much everything that you're saying. You're preaching to a choir here in that regard. But this is kind of what we need in Juneau. We need people who understand that government can't be all things to all people, and we can't provide even to the aforementioned mother of five. You mentioned the single mom of five, and while I want to help people out, I also want people to understand there are consequences for your actions, right?
That is fair.
You don't get to be a single mother. I mean, unless you're a widow, right? You don't get to be a single mother of five without some consequences and some things going on. And I don't just think that everybody should bail you out because you made poor life choices.
I completely agree, and that's why there's no perfect cookie cutout for everyone here, right? But
yeah, no, exactly. So but I mean, again, as long as the philosophy of pulling ourselves up by our own bootstraps, having the smallest, most limited government possible to still provide the needed services.
Yep.
Those are things that are, and you talk about infrastructure. So tell me about your infrastructure thoughts, because that's one of your priorities there. Tell me a little bit about your infrastructure thoughts, including Point Mac and some of the other things you've talked about.
Yeah, I mean, Point Mac and the port within Point Mac, Port Mac would be amazing, right? And so one of the things I actually do like to highlight with that project is it's not going to be an avalanche of cost savings, right? But that would be a faster, more direct route to grocery stores, right? So at the very least, your truck miles are down, all that stuff. That's cool. The bigger picture there, though, is that the rail line spur gets completed. Now you have access to interior Alaska through a port that doesn't take as much to operate. So I'm told, right, with the dredging that they have to do on the Anchorage side, that doesn't exist as much over there on our side of the port. So I'm excited about that project, but beyond that, as infrastructure, I feel like we've got a good championing of that currently going on with Kevin McCabe at the present time. But what I want to focus on more is the importance of our highways. And maybe I'm going to bore you, Michael. You probably heard this pitch a million times, but those are our lifeblood. And especially in my district or our district as District O, right. That's where the sausage is made up north, right? If that road fails, or if that road falls in such disrepair, Fairbanks isn't getting their goods. Anderson, Healy, they're not. So I feel like there is still, even though they try to put stuff in budgets, I understand how majorities and minorities work, trust me, but I still feel like there is a priorities misalignment and a shared vision where why aren't we going to Fairbanks and saying, and even Democrat, Republican legislators, hey, I'm going to try to pitch you on my vision for you guys having reliable grocery service, right. Why is it's this conversation I feel like we haven't really approached too well, where we need to bring others along with our vision for the state, because that highway is the lifeblood. Flying's too expensive. We would be one to know that, right? And then boating around, you can't get everywhere, so you're left with driving, and we're not taking care of that infrastructure at the time, as well as we could be.
And as a libertarian, I could argue back and forth with the Republicans on some of the things that they want and everything else. But I think one thing that every person can agree with, regardless of your political philosophy, is that government should be, in part, that is one of the major functions of government, is keeping the roads open, right? I mean, keeping the bridges there, the things like that. And it seems to be a lot of times it's an afterthought or it's a secondary thought. And you're right. It is the lifeblood of a state, is that infrastructure and the highways here as well. So definitely a big thing. And we shouldn't let it, grind to a halt, which, I mean, or hold it hostage, in some
right.
ways.
And I like what you said too, is that it seems to be an afterthought. And I get it. You get these people, they come door to door on the legislators, right? They ask all these special interests.
Right.
And I know we've got 20 seconds, but real quick, they come through, noble causes, no doubt, noble causes. But that is not the majority of our district's needs, right? And they oftentimes, legislators choose to fund those as opposed to what the general constituency needs first.
Right.
I take issue with that.
Well, because again, its special interests are being served, right? I mean, at some point, and then that allows them to return easier. All right, here we go. Let's do it.
You don't look that excited that you're listening to the Michael Duke Show, but it's probably just because you got a bunch of Botox. Are you smiling? Blink twice if you need help. This is the Michael Duke Show.
I don't know why, but Ryan is blinking rapidly. I don't know what's going on there, but it's a little Botox going on. All right. Ryan Sheldon is our guest. And as I said before we went into break, there's a lot of problems in the state, but the problems seem to all be coming back to the question of the budgets. $1.9 billion. That's the deficits moving forward every year, according to the governor's own 10-year forecast. Now, even if you account for some of that being dividend and everything else, and let's just say you take all the dividends out of that, it's still, we're $500 million plus a year in deficit. And I hear about, resource development. I hear that, that's a solution. Yeah, sure, it is. I mean, it's great. We need to develop our resources. We need to do a lot of this other stuff. But those are 5 and 10 year cycles, right? I mean, it's going to take 5 to 10 years to tail out to get real revenues from some of these new sources and everything else. So the biggest question is, how do we survive in the meanwhile? How do we keep people in the state in the meanwhile? How do we move forward when every year we're running a deficit and we're putting it more and more on the backs of Alaskans by taking the dividend, and yet still continue to increase the spending? So what is your thought as far as, budgets, the sustainability of it? How do we fix that shortfall or squeeze that deficit down? What do we need to do? What is your plan as far as, long-term and short-term sustainability in our budgets?
I'll call it a cheat code. It's not, I didn't come up with this idea. A lot of you listening remember the Fiscal Policy Working Group of 2021. Hilariously, that was former Senator Shower and former Rep JKT. And they were in there together and they were going through and trying to figure out a path forward. And I was talking to Mike the other day about this, and he just he said, in there, and I went back and read it, there is a lot of good policy in there that for some reason the legislature said, yep, that's cool. Okay, on the shelf, and let's continue spending, right? So I want to take a hard line on the Fiscal Policy Working Group and say, look, a lot of work was done here. A lot of good work was. Why can we not seem to wrap our minds around implementing at least some of it? And I think that would solve a fair amount of our issues. And like you said, I like what you said, squeezing down the deficit spending. It's not going to happen overnight. And I also appreciate that you do call it deficit spending, because some people in Juneau don't really know what a checkbook is. They go, well, that's just free money over there. No, I mean, because the state can't, we're not like the feds where we can just print unlimited money. So our form of deficit spending is taking from our savings, right? And so the things that I like to highlight, though, is vacancy rates. Though I'm sure when Ben comes on, he can probably talk about this too. But I wrote this down and I quite like this. Can I read this to you? It says, so I said, imagine you have a lemonade stand and told your parents it takes 2 people to run each day. And your quote unquote bankrolling parents provide you with the cash, you hire the 2 workers, and before the services are rendered, so you can get all the operations together, make it clean and great. Over 2 summers, that runs smoothly and efficiently because you told them how much it takes to run, right? On the 3rd summer of business, you tell your parents it now takes 3 people to run, and when in reality, it only takes 2 people still. And they believe you, and they just say, "Here you go. Here's some extra funding."
Right.
You never hire the 3rd person, and instead you take your friends to Disneyland. And no doubt, Disneyland might be a great morale boost for your employees, but it wasn't used for the original intent. And so that's a very, very basic way of explaining the vacancy rates. That when that comes up is we have or state organizations on the book that run 1 to 5 to 6% surpluses when it comes to that scenario, that situation where they're asking for more people than they even currently have working, and we fund it like a slush fund. And the pushback there is that, well, we as a department, pick your favorite one, Department of Corrections, we use that to cover budget shortfalls. That may be, but shore up that side first and then address the budget shortfalls head on if that is a thing, right?
Right.
So,
if you have, that should be documented in your budget, right? If you've got a problem, that should be documented in your budget. You shouldn't be using it as a slush fund to basically cover. And unfortunately, we know part of what's happening here is that they're utilizing it to offer overtime for employees, especially employees who are close to retirement, because we know how the retirement system works. It's the top 3 years of income. That's how it determines your retirement. So they're using it to pad employees' retirement income in the long run. That's what it's being used for. And again, it keeps getting shot down. That's another efficiency. So again, you're a fan of the fiscal policy working group, and I'm assuming the whole holistic aspect of it, from the spending cap to the permanent fund being constitutionalized to the cuts to the sales tax, and I mean everything else. You're all 8 or 9 points of that. You're in favor of those?
I am, and it might not be super popular, but one thing that I think we've also been missing in Juneau is honesty. I mean, we have people that gallivant around on these, what I would call like ideological battles, instead of the things that would make our state great. And we have to start looking at doing things a little differently, because the last decade, I tell people all the time, if you're happy with the last decade of Alaskan performance, great. If you're not, vote me, get me in there and try to do something different. So, that's what we're trying to do. Ryan Sheldon is our guest candidate for Senate District O. We got about 4.5 minutes here. What is, and I guess this is my last question before I allow you to do the wrap up here, but having been in Juneau as a staffer and seen, again, the behind the scenes stuff and everything else, what was the most shocking thing to you? And what was the most disappointing thing? Shocking, and maybe it's the same thing, I don't know. Shocking and disappointing thing for you that you saw while you were there and that you would like to make a change to? Shocking thing is the amount of, the lack of transparency. You talk when they go into conference committees and whatnot, like not even members have any idea what goes on in those, and then they come out and then they actually do their quote unquote on the record stuff, and the score is already set. So I'd like to see some more transparency. Alaskans deserve transparency. And the disappointing thing, I'll return to what I said at the beginning, and I do believe this, is that it is disappointing. I would expect better of Alaskans to actually want to get together and make a difference, as opposed to, well, what's in it for me? And someone the other day, I can't remember which legislator, but I quite liked it, where they said, he or she said, the first 4 years is where you kind of learn the ropes, and you can see that happen with a lot of legislators. That's great. They're there, they're learning it, they're getting involved. The next 4 years is their bread and butter. And then every year after that, they start on this steady decline because it no longer becomes doing a duty or doing service for Alaskans, but it becomes, how can I get reelected? And that should never, ever, ever be at the front of mind for someone that's gripping onto power with the death grip so bad that they lose sight of what they're down there to do. And that's disappointing.
Right. So. Well, and that again folds back into what you just said previously, which is, when their focus becomes the exercise of personal power, and their whole the whole exercise of personal power is wrapped up in getting reelected so that they can do it. That definitely is problematic, to say the least, when we see that going on out there. All right, we're down to the last couple minutes here, so let's get to it. Final thoughts here, Ryan, what I like to call the elevator pitch. You bumped into somebody and let me tell you why you should vote for me. So how do folks find you? Why should they vote for you? Final 2 minutes. Ryan Sheldon, candidate for Senate District O.
Yep. You can find me, RyanForAlaska.com. The number or the word for works. I have both. Did my homework on that. But basically, if you've been here with us the last hour, you can hear my passion. I'm extraordinarily passionate about Alaska. I want to see the state succeed and thrive. I don't believe we've been getting that job done. And I'm an option for people that are tired of politics as usual, or business as usual. I'm not a politician. I haven't been, elected over and over and over again. I ask people a simple question. Go and ask your current legislators what they've passed, what they've done for you, and how that legislation has affected you. And more often than not, we find stuff that goes on and they say, well, I passed, a dozen bills. And we find out that it was a bunch of naming, stuff and whatnot. And so I want to be a reasonable person that is representative of our whole district to go down there and actually carry out our collective vision. Because I believe that also hasn't been accomplished. I want to get back to the grassroots level and truly represent people how they expect to be represented and transparently. And I'm a businessman by trade. Like I said earlier, I love finding efficiencies. And I'm in it for the long haul. I'm not moving out of the state. My wife, Molly, and I are very much looking forward to raising a family here. And she's actually going off to med school in Anchorage. She just started this week. So there you go. We're invested. So I hope that you invest in me with your vote. So
in it to win it, in it for the long haul. Yeah. Ryan Sheldon, our guest. Ryan, thank you for coming on board. We appreciate you being part of the show today.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, hold the line for a second. RyanForAlaska.com. We're out of time for now, but Ben Carpenter's coming up next. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. All right, Ryan, I don't know if you have watched the show, but this is where we give you a chance for a final bite at the apple. Is there anything we didn't cover? Something that you were like, oh, we really need to, we should have talked about this, or you want to expand on something? Got about 2 minutes here that we'll give you the floor on anything
I think we did great. It was, I really don't have all that much to add. And I just I wish we were almost in a room with everyone listening, because I love the face-to-face interaction. This is great as well. But like I said, I'm looking to invest in the next generation of Alaska. And I really do, back to the energy equation. If we can solve our energy problem and get more on grid, we can very much expect the next golden age of Alaska to come about, because then we'll actually be able to usher that in. And so that's my goal. I don't want this to be a place that's becoming very quickly more of a glorified territory. I mean, we have the title of statehood since '59, but there is a lot of reliance on the feds, because Alaska doesn't know how to fight for itself. I'll leave it at that.
Right. Well, we become a dependency state in so many ways, both at the federal level and even at the state level. I mean, you've talked about that, already, where, we're trying to be all things to all people. And we've got crony capitalism on the one side, where whole businesses have built their entire business model around government contracts and government largesse. And then we've got the social safety net welfare programs on the other side. We become, you're fourth generation. Where's the rugged individualism that we saw in our parents and in our grandparents, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with someone in Valdez the other day about that, and I get pissed off when people go, we've lost this sense of what it is to be an Alaskan, and you say rugged individualism, and I think being an Alaskan is even more unique than that, and we have this shared vision, this shared belief of being pissed off when we have people come to the state, they take our stuff, they retire, and then they say, I'm going home to Oklahoma. I'm like, this is your home, right? Like stay here, enjoy Alaska, continue to invest here, and we're here for a reason. We love the outdoors, we love the opportunities that we have as Alaskans. So let's stick with it. So
no, and quit looking to other people to solve, to government to solve those problems. And like you said, I think we could, if we did have think about how many problems would be solved in this state if we had affordable energy.
Yeah.
If Fairbanks wasn't paying 27 to 30 cents a kilowatt hour for their electricity, or, the electric bills and the energy bills in other parts of the state weren't, and of course the poor people in the bush communities paying, $1.50 or $2 for a kilowatt hour of energy. Yeah. I mean, just think about what we could do. Like you said, everything from manufacturing to everything else, it could change how we do things.
Right. And I'll tickle this maybe for the next time, but I'd love to see if energy comes about in an abundance, we could perhaps manufacture Jet A, because we've got a captive audience at Ted Stevens, Yeah. So doing more value add for our resources, that's the best way to get us back on the right footing. So
yeah, no, it's definitely some plus. And Brian does make a point. More important than the cost is the certainty. We definitely need sustainable dispatchable power, and like you said, hydro is a good choice, coal is a good choice. We should be exploring micronuclear, we should be exploring all those options, and finding something that is working out good. All right, well, Ryan, it was a great conversation. I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on board, and we look forward to talking to you again here before we get too far along. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Appreciate you being part of the show today. All right. So Ryan Sheldon, he can hang out in the green room for a minute here while we do our thing. We're going to get, I got to do this here because the wind is going crazy up where Ben is, and it's forced his internet offline. So he doesn't have any internet. So we're going to get Ben Carpenter on the air here, and we got the let's do this right here. We'll get him going. All right. Winds is 29 with gusts to 44, says Chris. Can you hear me, Ben?
Good morning, Michael.
How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good. Is everything still on the ground, or does it feel like Dorothy's arrived?
I've actually stepped outside, and it is everything is still where it should be, but my tower is up and operational. It is Spitspot's tower that's not. So
yeah, well, there you go. Now you know why Starlink works so good.
Yeah.
Skynet, Starlink. I will say that's the best money I've ever spent is on the Starlink. That's a good solid system. So I'm with you on that. All right, Ben, you ready to dive into this? Did you happen to watch my show yesterday with Justin? You were in the chat room, so I think you did, right?
Yeah, I caught the tail end of it,
okay.
And I went back and rewatched it, so I'm good.
Because I really want to dissect that a little bit more and get your take on it, and get your thoughts on where we're going from here. So that's where I want to be. So I'm going to put you back on hold, and we'll continue. Ben Carpenter, our guest here, the host of Oversight Live. No video today. Sorry, Harold, you won't see the cowboy hat. Sorry, no cowboy hat today. Apparently, Harold is all Brokeback Mountain over you, Ben. I don't know. He really wants to see you in that cowboy hat. I don't know what the deal is, but no cowboy hat today. So we'll have Ben Carpenter on the telephone, and we'll continue the Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Hour 2 is right now. Let's get to it.
Buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com, where you'll find links to the audio-only stream, the podcast, and, of course, social media, where we simulcast the radio show every day on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble, and live around the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station, and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends, and welcome back to the program. We are ready to go. In hour two, we finished up with Ryan Sheldon in the first hour. Good interview, straightforward young guy. Really liked what he had to say. We're hoping that we'll have him back here on the program shortly to talk about some of the stuff. Meanwhile, hour two of today, being Thursday, means that we're going to be joined by our weekly guest, who is, of course, former Representative Ben Carpenter, who is now the host of Oversight Live. Ben is up in the Kiski area where they're experiencing a big windstorm right now, so his internet's gone down. So we have him on the phone, and so hopefully his phone signal keeps up with us here for this hour. But we're going to dive into it here with him today, and let's see what Ben Carpenter has to say about everything that's been going on this week. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, and I'm another young guy. Sheldon and I have something in common.
Yeah, you are. You're another young, although not quite as young as I would expect to see.
Less young.
Yeah, less young. You're like between me and you're like between the two of us, or Although I mean, you look really. I think we're almost of a cadre, you and I. Although I apparently had a lot more stress in my younger life because everything turned white. But it's okay. It's okay. I'm not bitter about it, man. I'm not bitter. It's just, it is what it is.
It's all in the Levi's.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I'm using an older photo of you when you were, younger and more handsome. So it's all good. All right, let's jump into it, Ben, and let's talk about, well, I guess everything in my mind, everything goes back to yesterday's show and our discussion with Representative Justin Ruffridge about what happened and kind of the behind the scenes, pulling the curtain back and looking at what was going on in the conference committee and what happened during this second special session. And of course, we have an upcoming special session, which is probably not going to do anything. So I want to get your take on that. But let's start off with your thoughts from yesterday's show. You were making some comments and you said you did go back and rewatch the whole thing. So could I get some commentary from you on the thoughts as you looked at what happened yesterday?
Sure. Well, I guess the first thing that jumps into my mind is like boiling this down to where we are right now, facing an election cycle, is that elections have consequences, and that's something that Representative Ruffridge spoke about. The dynamics in the legislature are kind of hard to understand. I would say intuitively, but it's hard to really fathom and understand at an emotional level unless you've actually been down there. Like it doesn't make sense. There's nothing else that really prepares you as an experience or to understand how things are. Power is exercised in the legislature, and I'm being really trying to get down foundational and fundamental and very basic here, right? Power is exercised. That the results of that exercising of power is what we see in the bills and the language that gets passed, the priorities that get established, the things that get addressed on the calendar. And so basically what happens and what is done or accomplished within the 5 months that we have a legislative session or a specific special session or whatever. So all of the power being exercised is determined by the members that we send down there. Now, we in this state and many states have, grown up in this two-party system where you've got Republicans and Democrats, and the assumption is that if you elect one more of one than the other, then those are the ones that are in charge. Well, that's oversimplification of what is happening down in Juneau is not accurate. And if we're going into this election cycle and tying into the elections have consequences mantra, you can't just treat this as a Republican versus Democrat problem set. It is bigger than that. And I think that's what Justin was trying to communicate is the results of what has happened with HB 381 and this gas line is a byproduct of the exercising of power because the people sent the wrong people down there to prioritize a gas line. For this entire legislature, the focus, the big picture, the big item that the legislature has been trying to figure out how to get solved has been this defined benefits pension. That's their one big thing that they had in their basket that they wanted to try to accomplish. That's the priority of the majorities in the House and the Senate right now, and that's what moves into the next legislature because they were one vote short, right? They were a governor, one governor away from having a return to a pension. Right. So the focus is on taking care of government employees, taking care of government. The focus has not been on energy, solving that energy problem. And that is a byproduct of who you sent down there. So elections have consequences. If you want the legislature next year to take the problem set seriously, the natural gas pipeline problem set, then you have to send different people down there to the extent that it is possible because the deadline for filing to run for election is already come and gone. So you're kind of stuck with who's on the ballot. But the decisions that you make, if you want that to be the priority versus defined benefits or a number of other things, but at least defined benefits, that's the big I'm like thinking about the whack-a-moles
right
board that you see at circuses, right? Yeah. It's the big one that pops up. That's the one that is trying to, that keeps rearing its head and is the priority here. So if you don't want that, if you want to replace it with the gas line and doing something about energy like Sheldon was talking about, you got to send different people down there because that's the priority of the current majority.
Well, and isn't this just indicative? Isn't this just an indicator of what the focus really is? Because let's break that down even farther. Let's say defined benefits was their one big wish on the wish list this year. What is why were they interested in that? Because again, it solidifies the power base. It gives back to their special interest, which again, in this case, the unions and the employees, and it gives them what they want, which is reelection. So this again goes back to what Sheldon was just talking about, where self-interest and personal power is trumping the good of the whole state. That's really because, I mean, and again, not even getting into the financial aspects of the defined benefits, but this really is what this is all about. Their own personal power and the bid to get reelected, that becomes the number one issue on everybody's mind. And really, that's what happened with this last special session and all this maneuvering. This is all about it's not about getting more affordable energy. It's not about bolstering the economy. It's not about taking care of Alaskans. It's not about developing our resources. This was all about posturing for the next session and the organization of the next session. That's what this was about.
I agree. I agree. That is, and I've tried to explain why an income tax, a corporate income tax, is necessary to remain on the agenda. It is because that majority is being cobbled together by a handful of Republicans and a majority of Democrats. And for years, the Democrats have been asking for an individual income tax, a corporate income tax, tax the oil companies, increase revenue any way possible. So in order for the majority to stick together, this tax increase has to stay in part of the dynamics of that caucus. If you were to take a hard stand, then it probably breaks that caucus apart. And I've heard some questions from people who don't understand what the word caucus is. And all I can say is, in regards to your majority caucuses, to try to help people understand this, when I say power is exercised, I'm meaning the majority caucus, and in this word, the caucus just means team. The majority team, the legislators who have agreed to work together in the majority, that's the caucus, the majority team, and they get to decide what the priority is, or what bills come forward, what solutions they want to prioritize. And if you want a different outcome, you have to change that majority caucus. Well, they want to hold it together because the defined benefits is the ask. It's the thing that makes it easy for control to be maintained along the workforce in the state. Okay, if the employee is tied, they've got the golden handcuffs of the pension, and that's what they have at the light at the end of the tunnel, then you don't have to do a bunch of other things in the management realm. You don't have to treat people with but if there was competition, right? Because you take the competition piece out of it. Now you're focused on getting that retirement check. You're invested, and now you have to stick. Now you have to stay, and I don't have to compete as much anymore. And that is like you hear this mantra from the unions that say, "Oh well, turnover's incredibly important, and we just can't manage it. We're hemorrhaging people, and we have to have defined benefits in order to help this recruiting and retention." Okay. Well, that's the same problem that other companies have.
Right. They're looking for stability. They're looking for stability and predictability in everything so that they don't have to fight and be competitive with other parts of the market, because that way they could just say, we can always get the best. We can always, which again, you can't, that's not how the market works. You can't have that stability and the surety that a lot of these people are looking for without basically bilking it all out of the government coffers.
That's right. And so the defined benefits gives them the ability to maintain that stability within the workforce, but it's artificial. It's in the way that only government can do. And that's the old, and so they also see a tie to the permanent fund, right? You've got these earnings coming out, and those theoretically those earnings continue into the future. And so if you can get your defined benefit pension tied to those earnings, then you've got a connection, a pathway that's sure and set for into the future. So it takes all of the risk and gives you all of the power. It takes away the risk of a down market, right? Because that's what your 401k style retirement system, you share, the employee shares in the risk, the employer shares in the risk. With a defined benefit pension, the state assumes 100% of the risk. Taxpayers assume 100% of the risk on those pensions. That takes the equation of what happens in the economy out of it. And if you can tie that to the permanent fund earnings instead of taxpayers, then you're golden. Like, you've got a sure thing for retirement. Those people, those state workers, are looking at it and saying, that's the advantage of working in the state, is my retirement is guaranteed as long as the permanent fund continues.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah. No, that's it. And again, it all goes back to self-interest. It's not about what's best for the state. It's about what's best for the special interest, which in turn are doing what's best for the legislators to send them back, which serves their self-interest as well. And that's why we're seeing all these things that we're seeing right now. Ben Carpenter is our guest. We're coming up on the break. We're going to continue here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/Michael Duke Show. We'll return right after this.
Tune in Friday for our weekend entertainment and movie streaming review with our guest critic, Willie Waffle. That's actually his real name. Really? That's his real name? Man, his parents must have hated him. The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Ben Carpenter is our guest here on the program. Brian just said, so is this a repudiation of Ayn Rand? Was that what you're trying to say? I mean, I don't know. I would say it's a confirmation more of Ayn Rand than anything else. I mean, again, we're seeing Ord de Tocqueville or whoever it was that talked about, voting largesse out of the public treasury. That's where we're at right now, right, Ben? I mean, we've gotten to that point where they realize if they can tie themselves to the public treasury in a way, and especially to like the permanent fund where it's a guaranteed payout, we've reached that kind of that peak area of that philosophy.
Yeah, I don't know about tying it back to. I mean, no philosopher had the Alaska Permanent Fund in mind when they were talking about this, right? I don't. It is a double-edged sword, this permanent fund, because it's a bunch of free money from the perspective of government. They don't have to go to taxpayers for it, right? So you don't have that in any of your models from the beginning of the discussion of democracy in the United States. Free money only comes from the federal government. So it's hard to draw an analogy to exactly how the predictions of other things from smart people of yesteryear.
Right.
All I'm saying is you've got all this free money, this permanent fund earnings, and the state workers and the unions look at it and say, through the budget, this is how we're going to fund our budget. We don't have an income tax. We don't have a sales tax. We don't have other revenue sources. And it is the only one that's growing right now. Our oil revenue has shrunk over the last decade. The legislature is not focused on growing the oil revenue. Matter of fact, the same individuals who are interested in killing the pipeline are the same individuals who would, do away with oil production in the state if they could, right? So it's a focus on this permanent fund earnings as being our cash cow for the future, and that's the future. So I don't know where the philosophers of the past would fall down on this free money. I think that they probably would say there's no such thing as free money. Like it's going to cost somebody something at some point in time.
Right.
And it's not healthy for this. If you're a limited government guy, having a big pool of free money that government just gets to grow perpetually from, that's not healthy.
No, because
that's not how you maintain limited government.
No, that's because there's supposed to be a give and take between the citizenry and the government. There's supposed to be, there's a limitation on how much you can use, how much you can spend based on the tolerance level of the public for the taxation to take that out of their pockets. But if you have this access to this quote unquote free money of this big pot that just keeps growing and you can just liberally draw from it whenever you want, then it grows out of control and out of check and disproportionately to what's happening in the private economy. And that's how we got to where we are. I know it's not free money, Barbara. That's what we're saying. They're treating it as such. And that's how we got to where we are today, is that there was no connectivity.
I'm speaking from the perspective of the thinking in Juneau when I say free money. Okay. They do not have to go to the taxpayer to ask for an additional tax increase or more money. The permanent fund just gives them more money every year. This last budget, on day one, Senator Hoffman came in and said at the press conference, we've got $200 million more in permanent fund earnings than we did last year.
Yep.
That's the point that I'm trying to make.
Yep.
Is there's this growing pool of money that's not tied to taxes.
Right. And it's one of the reasons why, quite honestly, they wanted to combine the funds so that they could get access to even more, or to guarantee, again, what we were talking about, that certainty or stability, in the same way, to basically say, oh, we can guarantee that we're going to get our 5% or whatever, no matter what happens in the markets. Again, aside from what the markets can do. So, yeah, it's a huge problem. All right, we're 5 seconds out. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show.
On the Michael Duke Show, we talk about the serious Alaskan issues of the day in a not so serious way, because we just can't be bothered to take things seriously. That's how you lose some hair. The Michael Duke Show.
All right, we're continuing with Ben Carpenter, our guest, here on the big radio program. Let's continue on now, Ben. So the second special session was over. We saw it all come apart and go to pieces. We've now had the dissection with Justin Ruffridge of exactly what happened there. And that leaves us to the third special session, which the governor has now called for Monday. And we're already seeing, of course, from various legislators who've said that they've gotten the news that they're not to show up in Juneau, that it's just going to be a technical session. What do you think goes on? What do you think happens from here? What's your prediction for what happens from here, for the special session, for the gas line, and for the coming session? What do you see happening here?
Well, they need people to show up, and I understand that it's the date that everybody's being told to show up is the 10th of August, so about halfway through the session. So there's a couple of things that you could extrapolate from that. They think, number one, they could think that the solution to the problem here, if they're going to pass a couple of bills, could be really easy, and they won't need a bunch of time to do it, and thus we can spend this first 2 weeks in the 30 days doing something else. Or you could look at it from a different perspective that says we have no interest in passing any bills, and we need you back on the 10th to just gavel out. So those are kind of the extremes that I would see, right? If they think that they're going to come back on the 10th and then only leave themselves 2 weeks or so to engage in the process, the messy process that it's taken now, I think this is technically the fourth special session. If you think that is only going to take 2 weeks, then there's a disconnect there. It doesn't make sense. So my prediction, and what I expect to have happen, is nothing. Like, I think that they're coming back on the 10th, and they will probably gavel out. They will just gavel out. I think that the news articles that have been written thus far indicate that the leadership in the Senate, especially, has no interest in engaging in the conversation any further. Period. So they will be content to kick the can down the road for a potential gas line until next legislature, if at all. And if that means Glen Farm goes away, then it's on Glen Farm's dime. The legislature doesn't have to pay them anything because Glen Farm chooses to leave. And that likely means that we have a conversation about how do we recover the gas line, ownership of the gas line project. And I think that's really ultimately what many in the leadership have as an end goal here, is to do away with the private ownership of the pipeline. They are frustrated that AG. I mean, you have to remember, it was not but 2 years ago that the president of AGDC his job was on the chopping block from the legislature's perspective. They wanted to fire Frank Richards because I think their perspective, the leaders in the legislature were thinking, Frank's not the guy to get this pipeline built. We've got this public ownership, this state ownership of the pipeline, and Frank can't find the developer to build it. So we need to find a different CEO. We've got the wrong people in the CEO position and the wrong leadership in AGDC to get this pipeline built. So we need to find somebody different. When really what the market is saying is there's no way we're going to invest in a state-owned pipeline, especially the Alaska state-owned pipeline that has to deal with the Alaska legislature.
Right.
So that's the underlying problem as to why we couldn't build a pipeline for the last decade, is because it's been state-owned. Now you've got private ownership. So you want to change the model to a private ownership and find somebody different than Glenfarne? Well, I don't think that's the model that the legislature's after. All of the questions that are going on within the Senate Finance and Senate Resources all had to do with questioning the legitimacy of the project from an owner perspective. The state legislature is not the owner of the project anymore. They're a minority owner through AGDC.
Right.
So I think that's what's actually at play here, is they want to see Glenfarne bow out and the state return ownership of the project to the state. That's the only thing that makes sense to me with regard to the questions that have gone on over the last few months. Ever since we started this gas line tax conversation.
Right.
And we're not talking too much about taxes. We're talking about legitimate, whether the pipeline can move forward or not from an owner perspective.
Well, and it would also explain why they had such heartburn over some of the exposed information in the memo that came out that said that if Glenfarne did bow out, that the state would then have to pay for their ownership, for the expanded ownership rights to come back as well. That's why they were so burned up about that. Because again,
and that was a reminder.
Yeah. Go ahead.
That information came out in a meeting in the year prior, just after Glenfarne came on the picture. Glenfarne notified the legislature about that provision, that clawback provision. Okay, this was just a reminder to the legislature, and I don't know who leaked it. I don't know how the information got out there, but it clearly was somebody from AGDC. And in my own mind, it's somebody from AGDC or somebody from Glenfarne that leaked this, or maybe there's a friendly in the legislature that leaked it. I don't know. I don't know who it was, but it was pertinent at the time because the conversation then turned to Glenfarne. How do we get rid of Glenfarne? And that's, in my mind, that's always been the goal of the legislature, is to get rid of Glenfarne.
Which, again, puts us back in the same boat that we were for the last 10 years with a state-owned pipeline that nobody wants to invest in because nobody wants to have to deal with politicians as basically directors of the pipeline. That's what they don't want that. They want some certainty in letting the market decide and not just the vagaries and whims of some politician in Juneau.
Yeah, so look at what's happening, not what they're saying, but what's happening. There is no sense of urgency from a legislative calendar or bill or effort priority, right? There's no sense of urgency in the legislature to solve the problem of the gas shortage. NSTAR comes in and NSTAR is telling the legislature, hey, we've got a problem here that we need to fix. The legislature's not trying to fix that. There's no sense of urgency, okay? And this is what I'm trying to communicate to people. There is a lack of connection between what's happening in the private economy, the private sector, and what's happening in government. Government doesn't care if the price of energy goes up. It is just another line item on the budget, and it just means we take a little bit more money out of the permanent fund earnings to pay for that line item. It isn't a problem of epic proportions. It isn't a problem that needs extraordinary attention. NSTAR has an extraordinary problem that where they're going to run out of gas.
Right.
Alaskans have an extraordinary problem that our cost of energy is going up. Government does not have that problem. It just takes more money from the permanent fund earnings to pay for that higher cost of energy.
Right.
Inflation goes up. You and I in the private sector, we lag. We face that suffer, but the government is going to make sure that it covers inflation. It just increases taxes or takes more money out of the permanent fund earnings. It's going to get its money, right? So this is what I think. That's what I think the bigger picture is here.
The bigger picture is state control of the pipeline is the ultimate goal. And that's
right.
That goes back to every other argument we've heard, including the fact that how do we get more money out of this? $800 million a year is not enough, yada, 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 because they see on the other side that they could be, hypothetically reaping all the profits instead of just a portion of the profits. That's what they're that's what they're gaining. That's what they want. That's why they were so reticent to accept only a measly $1 billion a year in profits, because they see the possibility of getting $3 or $4 or $5 billion and growing government even more.
You were talking with Sheldon. I don't know how much time we've got here in this segment, but
got about
talking with Sheldon about
3 minutes.
You were talking to him about budgets and reducing spending. Look at what's happened since 2013. You have seen an increase in the operating budget and a decrease in the capital budget. This is the priority of the legislature. It's taking care of itself. It's taking care of government. It isn't taking care of infrastructure and the private economy. It is taking care of, it grows the operating budget. In the 6 years that I was in the legislature, they added 600 positions and $600 million in your personnel services line. I don't know whether they hired 600 people. They added 600 positions, which is just the way to spend more on current employees. This is the operating budget crowding out the capital budget.
And ironically,
the legislature wants to talk about the revenue sources.
Right.
But really what's happening is the growth of that operating budget is crowding out things that would invest in your private economy, which is your capital budget.
Right. Which ironically, there's a constitutional mandate that the capital budget is supposed to be what, 1/3 of the operating budget? Isn't that an actual constitutional requirement at some point?
Yeah, who's going to enforce it?
Well, I mean, I guess that's a great question. I mean, if they're breaking the law, the constitutional law, somebody would have to bring it forward as a case, I guess. But I mean, this again just shows that the framers understood that it was important that the capital budget be a significant component of the annual budget, because that's what helps out the private economy and keeps everything rolling. But they're completely ignoring it. I mean, so much for the rule of law, I guess, at that point.
Yeah, well, the court may say, hey, the legislature needs to address this, but I don't think they would. I think they would look at the legislature and say, look, they're the power. They are the one that controls the purse by the Constitution. The courts don't. The executive branch doesn't. Whatever the legislature decides to do is what they decide to do. No one's going to enforce or force the legislature to do anything. They're the highest law in the land. The only entity that can force the legislature to do something different is the electorate, by swapping out the people in the legislature.
Right.
Your governor can't force the legislature to do something different. He's not that powerful. He's not a king. He can't force them to do it. He can veto bills and veto budgets, but he can't force them to spend money. The courts can say, hey, you need to spend money on this, but the legislature doesn't have to listen to them. And I'm talking about the exercise of power. You've got a requirement in the rules of the legislature, how the legislature says we're going to govern ourselves. It says in a conference committee, we can only take provision or that bill. We can't add to it unless we have free powers of free conference, or unless we're a free conference committee. Let's put it that way. Okay. They totally ignored that, and they just put their own, called it revisions, and they're not following their own rules. Why would they follow the law?
Right.
And it's the exercise of power. And ultimately the tyrannical legislature, a hypothetical tyrannical legislature, is one where they exercise power and disregard what the people want or what laws want. But who is going to stop them? There isn't anybody to stop the legislature. This is the point of why people need to pay attention and understand what's going on and exercise their power as an electorate at the election. Elections have consequences.
Right.
You want the legislature to focus on defined benefits and growing the operating budget? Then continue to send those people to the legislature. That's who you've got right now.
Ben Carpenter is our guest. He's the host of Oversight Live. You can find him on Facebook, YouTube, and X, also at oversightlive.com, where most weeknights he dissects this stuff while the legislature's in session. We'll continue this conversation about the electorate, and I'm going to ask Ben some interesting questions on the other side as well. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Ben Carpenter, our guest here on the program. Just a quick teaser, Ben, because I'm going to ask you. I mean, we've said this, and essentially, I'm not trying to be pedantic here, but essentially, what you're saying is vote harder. Which we've advocated for on this program. We've advocated, the Charter of Changes said change out the players. The problem is it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, which is the self-interest. And in this case, it's the self-interest of the constituency of some of the players in there who are the ones that have their hands on the tillers, the ones that got the reins of control in their hands, the Bert Stedmans of the world, and the Bryce Edgmans and the Gary Stevenses, where their constituency thinks, oh, they're giving us everything we want, so they just keep sending them back. We could change out all the rest of the legislators, but if these old time legislators keep doing it and keep that 5 or 6 people in there that keep holding the reins of power, what difference does it make at that point, right? I mean, that's the problem.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I think vote harder is not necessarily what I'm trying to communicate. I'm vote wiser, maybe. I also think that it's an understanding piece. How many times do people go into the ballot box and they just vote because it's an R or a D? How often do they go in and they vote because somebody else told them this is who we're voting for now? How often do people actually understand?
Right.
The issue, right? And I just think that, we tied into this rugged individualism, and just bear with me for a second here. There's a reason why I have a wood stove in my house. I could go to all propane, right, and not have to spend any money and time on wood stove. But I prioritize that time that I spend bucking wood and moving wood. Okay, I value that. It helps me, I have to schedule my time and I stay physically active, right? If I move to propane because I don't have natural gas at my place, and if I heated with oil or something like that, then I wouldn't have to do the wood bucking. I would have to find physical labor some other way to stay in shape, right? I don't have that activity. Rugged individualism in the past meant we were just solving some of our daily problems in the best ways that we could. Come oil season, right? We now found oil, and now we're a wealthy state. Now we replace wood with gas, and we say, wow, I'm glad I don't have to buck that wood anymore. But I didn't replace my time with gym activity, and I got fat. Okay, so much of what we are witnessing in our state right now is based upon this prioritization of our activities, of our life, of our wealth, that doesn't include paying attention to what's happening in the legislature and following what's really happening. Okay, just listening to sound bites. Once or twice a year when the election season rolls around.
Right. The uninformed the uninformed electorate is what you're talking about.
Yes, and it's the curse of being wealthy. That curse is that if you don't prioritize staying, tying into your roots and understanding where you came from and what's actually happening, like the civic duty piece of it, if you're not prioritizing that, like it's not on your calendar, you don't spend time going to meetings and talking to people about what's actually happening, paying attention, then it doesn't matter if you show up at the ballot box to vote. How do you have any confidence that you know what you're voting for? You haven't invested in understanding. And I think it just, when we're forming a state and we're new and we're trying to accomplish things because we're all struggling, then we're paying more attention. But once we become wealthy, we stop paying attention because life's better and it's comfortable now.
That reminds me of Fraser's whole cycle of empire thing, where it's bondage to freedom to opulence, and opulence to laziness, essentially, and then laziness leads back to tyranny. And I mean, it's the same thing. It's that cycle. It's that whole cycle that we're seeing again and again.
Yeah, it's human nature. I mean, if you want to take it from a biblical perspective, it's written about in the book. you have generations of people in the book that move through this cycle as well, right?
Right.
So I'm not saying anything that is controversial here. This is just the way things progress in human nature and in cultures and many countries throughout the world. Roman Empire fell apart because of opulence.
Right. Exactly. And now Craig is like, what we need to do is make Firearms Friday into Deferred Maintenance Friday and suck all the remaining joy out of Michael's life. Okay. I mean, that's, there you go. You're just being mean now. You're just being mean. All right. Well, let's continue this conversation. Ben Carpenter is our guest. We're about 10 seconds out. Please like and share. Please like and follow, do all that stuff. Only 25 shares with 60 people watching. All right, here we go. Let's do it.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay. We're continuing one final segment here for the Thursday show. Ben Carpenter, host of Oversight Live, is our guest. Former representative from down here on the peninsula. You can find him at oversightlive.com. So Ben, before we went to break, was just talking about how, it's they're exercising power in the legislature, and we as citizens need to exercise our power at the ballot box. And again, I said we were going to have some hard questions. Ben and I started to get into it a little bit here during the break, but Ben, let me recap my thoughts again. The bottom line is that people in general, I'm painting with a very broad brush here. People in general are not really paying attention to what's going on in their communities, in their state, in their boroughs, in their local elections. They feel like they go to the box, they pull the lever for the candidate that has the letter behind their name that they identify with. They're not paying attention to the details. They don't know what's going on. As long as somebody has an R or a D next to their name, and that's what they've always voted, they'll pull the lever and feel like they've done their duty. And that is the problem, is that we have an electorate that is not paying that close of attention, and they are ill-informed or uninformed. And they don't seem to have, it's not that they're stupid. It's just that they have some ignorance, and they're not willing to cure that ignorance is part of the problem. And we've got situations where there are communities who keep sending back the people like Bert Stedman or Gary Stevens, who are happy with what their legislators are doing, even though it's doing damage to the rest of the state. So how do you fix that?
Well, there's nothing besides personal responsibility that's going to fix this. And it's interesting that somebody brought up the deferred maintenance topic, because I think that you could probably make an argument that your deferred maintenance list is a barometer of how well people are paying attention at all different levels. Okay. 2013, the price of oil crashes. And one of the first things that is cut out of the budget is the very large capital budget that we had. Okay. So now you would have been spending a bunch of money on capital projects. That means infrastructure. Those infrastructure projects had a cost of maintenance built into them. Like, it was just the natural byproduct of having a piece of infrastructure is you've got to maintain it. Well, as your budget shrinks, and as people come on board and say, hey, we need these social services over here, and we're gonna reduce spending over in this other area. Well, we don't have enough money to do maintenance. We'll just add that to the deferred maintenance, and we'll pay for it later someday, right? So the not paying attention piece is, we're going to say yes to this thing today that's increases the operating budget, and we don't really realize that we're saying no to this maintenance thing because it's out of sight, out of mind. But now, more than a decade later, we've got a humongous deferred maintenance list of things that we've just let go by the wayside because we prioritized doing growth in the operating budget of services that need to be divvied out to us, and we're not paying attention to the other things that we should have been. So that the deferred maintenance should be part of your operating budget. It should be that line item on your budget that's competing with all of the other things, but we just ignore it.
Right. Well, I mean, and that's why it's a
barometer of that.
Right. That's why we have a $10 billion deferred maintenance in this state for all these things that they decided that the money was better spent on something else. Again, this is a prioritization problem. This is a power problem. And they had the power to do it. So they exercised their power to say, we're not going to maintain that leaking roof. We're just going to let it stand, and we're going to take the money for that and spend it on whatever our pet project was.
Yeah. History and human nature says that we're not going to address that until the pain point is high enough. And then you just look at your available options and address it. So it becomes, the longer we ignore it, the more painful it gets. I don't know how, what are the odds that Alaska bucks the system, bucks the historical narrative?
Not great.
Right? Not great, right? So eventually something is going to happen. Let's say the US dollar is no longer the international currency, and what's the monetary, I'm just drawing a blank on the name that I'm looking for, but anyway, the dollar is what everybody trades with, right? And we see a decline in our economy.
Right, the world reserve currency.
We see a decline in our stock market. Reserve currency, that's the word I'm looking for. Like, that's the international economic system right now is in flux. You're seeing a whole lot of conversation about U.S. military pulling out of Europe, and there will be an economic consequence to that worldwide. There will be a political consequence to the U.S. exerting power and force over Europeans who like to see the United States paying for their national defense. There'll be a political consequence for that. So the future, the economic future, looks bumpy. Like I see a lot of opportunity, but I think it's going to be politically a bumpy road. That translates to risk that we have a decline in our permanent fund and a decline in our economic engine here in the state of Alaska.
Not to mention federal spending, right?
Right, exactly. So if you see a reduction in the economy nationally, then you likely see a reduction in federal spending. And Alaska is one of the greatest or the largest recipients of federal dollars. So that we can see that federal dollar shrink. Like, this is the future that I think is more likely than an expanding federal monetary policy in the state of Alaska. So when that happens, we're going to have less options than we have today monetarily. So it just means that eventually we're going to make these decisions at the ballot box that have consequences, and eventually we'll have to deal with it. That's the future we're turning over to our kids and our grandkids. And it would be better if we stopped and realized that my calendar focusing on going out and fishing and enjoying life in my generation and not prioritizing being involved in civics has a consequence for the next generation. I'm handing over something worse for my kids.
Yeah.
We can stem that right now by turning around and changing that, but it causes us discomfort and pain. That's the problem. Will people choose to be uncomfortable and engage in something that they would rather not do in order to prevent some future event? That's what actually that's what's measured at the ballot box.
So
are you engaging in that?
Just over 2 minutes left here, Ben. So dumb it down for us in plain language. What is the solution in your mind? Just getting more people involved, getting them more educated, paying attention? What is the solution here?
Yeah, the solution is education. It's 100% education. You've got to pay attention. You got to start asking good questions and spending the time to get to know people, get to know the issues. If you're just reading the headline, like the 4 or 5 sentences on the headline that comes across social media or on your favorite news website, that's not good enough. If you're reading the news articles, that's not good enough. You've got to be involved with the community and individuals who are in positions of know, like they're involved in this, and get your questions answered yourself. Don't trust that the news media. Don't trust that what I'm saying is accurate on the news, on my show, on this show. Don't trust that. Go out and verify it yourself. And if you're not willing to do that, then don't be surprised when we fall off the cliff, because enough people are choosing that path. I don't know how that's the root. That is bottom line. That's what has to happen if we're going to see something happen to improve this process before we fall off the cliff.
Ben Carpenter is our guest. We are out of time for today. Ben, we appreciate you coming on the program and talking about it with us. I mean, I would love to see a more educated electorate, but again, Fat Ray says, will people choose pain? The answer is no. There's going to be something. It's going to have to be forced on them, and I don't know what that's going to take. And again, we can look back to Greece to see some of the issues there. We'll continue this. Thank you, folks. Tomorrow's Firearms Friday. Be kind, love one another, live well. The Michael Duke Show. We'll see you tomorrow. And that's the point, Ben. The point is, I mean, Fat Ray just says, will people choose pain? No. We saw the same thing in Greece when they were having their economic meltdown and the EU was like cracking down. And all of a sudden there had to be austerity measures and people were losing their mind because all their free stuff was going away. That's the thing. People won't choose pain until it's absolutely forced on them, even though they know that it may help in the long run. You know, it's the cure being, you know, making you sick when the disease will kill you. It's like, well, we'll just ignore it until we die. And then we don't have to go through the pain. And that's the problem. That's where we are right now.
Yeah, I guess that what it boils down to for me is that if I don't say something, then I'm culpable. So I'm going to say something, and I'm going to be vocal about what I think is happening and what is necessary. And my posterity, my kids and grandkids will be able to see and know that their grandfather, he did everything he could to change what has happened. So don't blame him.
Yeah.
And I will rest easy in that.
Well, you do everything you can.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I can't speak for anybody else, right? If you're going to stick your head in the sand, then you get the blame.
Yeah. No,
I don't know. How else do you shame people into something, right? How do you? If I don't want to shame people into it, but doggone it, if that's what's necessary to create some pain in your life is shame you into checking yourself, then maybe that's what's necessary. Like, I don't know how else to do it. If you prioritize going out and spending the entire summer on the boat fishing, and this is, I'm not speaking about commercial fishing that are putting food on the table or guides that are putting food on the table for their families, their livelihood. I'm talking about the people who are just checking out and going enjoying themselves. I don't know what else to tell you.
Well,
don't be surprised when the world falls apart because you've been playing.
Or it's escapism, right? I mean, it's what Orwell talked about. It's what this is it. It's the escapism of I don't want to face the true burdens of life and look at the hard issues. I'd rather watch must-see TV Thursday or go hunting or do whatever it is that you fill your time with. And I just don't want to have to think about it. I don't want to have to face it because it is painful. It is hard to talk about.
Yep.
But I can't look myself in the mirror and say, well, I don't want to talk about it anymore because I can't do anything about it. I'm going to go kicking and screaming till the very end. I mean, that's what I have to do because I feel like that's important. Now, are we going to change people's minds? I don't know. It just astonishes me how many people that I talk to about this, because that's the other thing. You got to talk about these things. And you'll find when you go out and do talk about these things, how people that you know are intelligent and compassionate and everything else, how little they know on these topics because they're not paying attention. You've got to bring it to their attention.
Yeah. I mean, there is some of that. And I agree that we can do the best job that we can in communicating to others, but personal responsibility is I can't be responsible for other people's personal responsibility.
Yeah, no,
it isn't something that even if I could, I shouldn't.
Right.
Like it isn't productive. So anyway.
You can do what you can do, and you're doing a lot. Ben Carpenter, host of Oversight Live. Thank you for coming on board, my friend. We'll talk to you again next week. Thanks for being part of it.
Always a pleasure. We'll see you next week.
All right, folks, that does it for me today. Tomorrow is a whole nother thing. We will see you then. Be kind, love one another, live well. The Michael Duke Show.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.